Hey everyone, welcome back. Before we dive into tonight's journey, I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Drop your city and the current time in the comments below. I genuinely love seeing who's up late with me, or maybe you're on the other side of the world having your morning coffee. Either way, I'm glad you're here. And if you enjoy these deep dives into history, the kind that let you drift off while learning something fascinating, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. It really does help. And I appreciate every single one of you who takes the time. Now, get comfortable, maybe dim the lights, turn on a fan for that soft background hum, grab your favourite blanket and let's ease into tonight's story together. You open your eyes and something is immediately wrong. The darkness around you isn't the familiar darkness of your bedroom. It's thicker somehow, more complete. No glow from a phone charger, no digital clock casting faint numbers across the wall. No street light filtering through curtains, just pure unbroken black. You blink a few times, waiting for your eyes to adjust, and that's when the smell hits you. Earth. Damp, musty, living earth. Not the faint scent of a potted plant or the distant memory of a camping trip, but the overwhelming presence of dirt, like you're sleeping inside the ground itself. You reach out instinctively for your phone and find nothing. Your hand touches something rough and scratchy instead. Fabric, but not like any sheets you own. This feels like burlap had a baby with sandpaper, coarse and stiff and vaguely hostile to your skin. You shift, and beneath you something crinkles and pokes, not a mattress, definitely not a mattress. More like a sack stuffed with dry grass or corn husks, and it's making sounds like something small might be living in it. You freeze. Where are you? What happened? Then comes the cold. Not the kind of cold where you reach for an extra blanket, but the kind that seeps into your bones, that makes you realise there's no central heating, no thermostat set to a comfortable 72 degrees. The air itself feels different too, sharp and clean in your lungs, but also carrying scents you can't place. Wood smoke, definitely. Animal smells, something like horses or cattle. And something else, something faintly unpleasant that you'll later realise is the accumulated scent of unwashed bodies and chamber pots and life without modern plumbing. Outside, because you're slowly realising this darkness has an outside, you hear sounds. A rooster crows, which seems absurdly loud and close, like it's standing 3 feet from your head. Somewhere in the distance, a cow lows mournfully. Hoofbeats on hard-packed dirt. A man's voice, rough and shouting something you can't make out. And then it hits you. The realisation creeping up your spine like ice water. You're not in your bedroom. You're not even in your time. Somehow, impossibly, you've woken up in the American frontier. The year is 1875, and you're somewhere on the Great Plains, and everything you know, everything you rely on, every single comfort of modern life is gone. Your heart starts hammering. No phone, no internet, no electricity, no running water. No police you can call, no hospital 5 minutes away, no grocery store. No Uber to take you home. Home doesn't exist yet. Your family, your friends, everyone you know won't be born for over 100 years. You're alone, genuinely alone, in a time and place where survival isn't guaranteed, where people die from things that wouldn't even send you to urgent care in 2025. A cut that gets infected, a bad tooth, drinking the wrong water, getting caught in a blizzard, making the wrong person angry. The list is endless, and you're suddenly at the bottom of it, completely unprepared. The first fingers of dawnlight start creeping through whatever structure you're in, and as your eyes adjust, the reality gets worse. You're in a sod house, walls literally made of stacked blocks of earth and prairie grass. The ceiling above you is more sod supported by rough wooden beams, and you can see gaps where sky peeks through. The floor beneath your sad excuse for a bed is just dirt. Packed dirt, sure, but dirt. No floorboards, no carpet, no tile. Dirt. And in the corner you see movement. Something small and dark scurries along the wall. Could be a mouse. Could it be something worse you don't want to know? Outside, the sounds of the settlement waking up grow louder. You hear a woman yelling at children to get up, get dressed, get to work. The crack of someone splitting wood echoes across the morning air. Dogs bark. More roosters join the dawn chorus like the world's worst alarm clock. And somewhere closer, footsteps approach your door, if you can call it that. It's more like a blanket hung over an opening. A voice, gruff and impatient, shouts from outside. "You gonna sleep all day? Sun's up, work's waiting. Ain't gonna feed you if you don't earn your keep." And just like that, your first day in the Wild West has begun. You have no idea who you are here, what your cover story might be, or how you're supposed to survive. But you're about to find out that every single thing you took for granted, from the moment you wake up to the moment you collapse back into this terrible bed tonight, was a luxury beyond imagination. The first thing you need to do is get up, and even that's harder than it should be. Your body is sore, aching into places you didn't know could ache. Turns out sleeping on a cornhusk mattress on a rope bed frame does things to your spine that no chiropractor has been invented yet to fix. You swing your legs over the side of the bed, and your feet touch cold dirt. No rug, no slippers waiting, just bare feet on freezing earth. You look around for your clothes, your modern clothes, but of course they're not here. Instead, there's a pile of rough garments on a wooden crate next to the bed. Heavy wool, pants that look like they've never met a washing machine. A shirt made of some kind of rough cotton or linen. Suspenders, a vest, and boots, cracked leather boots that smell like they've been worn by 3 other people before you. You pull on these clothes and they feel wrong on your skin. The wool itches immediately. The shirt is stiff and scratchy. Everything is either too big or too small in weird places. Nothing fits right. And you're already uncomfortable and you've been awake for maybe 10 minutes. But this is what you've got. So you lace up the boots, they're definitely too tight in the toes, and you stand up. The ceiling is lower than you expected. If you were tall in your own time, you're probably hunching a bit now. These structures weren't built with spaciousness in mind. Now comes the part that really drives home how different everything is. You need a bathroom. Your bladder is insistently reminding you of this fact. But there is no bathroom. There's no toilet, no sink, no shower, nothing. Instead, someone points you toward the outhouse, a small wooden structure about 50 yards from the house. 50 yards, in the cold, in the dark of pre-dawn, with questionable footwear. And you have to walk there, hoping you don't step on something or in something, hoping no animal decides you look interesting. The outhouse itself is a horror show. It's a wooden box built over a hole in the ground, and the smell hits you 10 feet away. Inside there's a bench with a hole cut in it, and beneath that hole is, well, you don't want to look. There's no toilet paper. Instead, there's a box of old newspaper, if you're lucky, or maybe corn cobs. Corn cobs, you read that right. People in 1875 are using dried corn cobs for toilet paper, and you're expected to do the same. You sit there on this splintery wooden seat in the freezing cold, trying not to breathe too deeply, trying not to think about what happens in winter when the temperature drops below zero, and this little shack offers no protection whatsoever. And here's something that won't occur to you until later, but it's worth noting. That outhouse hole, it's also home to spiders, potentially black widows, and in some regions, rattlesnakes looking for a cool, dark place to hide. So every time you use the facilities, there's a non-zero chance something is going to bite you somewhere extremely unfortunate. This is not paranoia, this is documented frontier reality. People died from outhouse spider bites. People got snake bit while taking care of business. The Wild West is trying to kill you in the most undignified ways possible. You make it back to the house and now you need to wash your hands, right? Except there's no sink, no faucet, no soap dispenser. Instead, there's a basin, a large bowl sitting on a wooden stand. Next to it is a pitcher, and the pitcher is empty. Because water doesn't come from a tap. Water comes from a well, if there is one, or from a stream a quarter mile away, and someone has to go get it. That someone you're now realizing might be you. So you grab a bucket, because there are always buckets in frontier life. Everything involves buckets, and you head outside to fetch water. The well is in the centre of the small settlement, shared by maybe a dozen families. It's just a hole in the ground with a wooden structure over it and a rope with a bucket attached. You lower the bucket down, hear the splash, wait for it to fill, and then haul it back up. And hauling it back up is work, real work. The rope is rough on your hands, the bucket is heavy when it's full, and your arms are shaking by the time you get it to the top. You pour the water into your carrying bucket, and you realise you need at least 2 more trips to have enough for the morning. 3 trips to the well before you can even wash your face. Back inside, you pour some of the water into the basin. It's cold. Obviously it's cold, there's no hot water heater. If you want warm water, you have to heat it. Over a fire, which you have to start. Using wood, you have to chop. Nothing, absolutely nothing happens without effort. You splash the cold water on your face and it takes your breath away. You have no soap, or rather, the soap available is a chunk of lye soap someone made by rendering animal fat and mixing it with ash. It smells terrible, it's harsh on your skin, and it doesn't lather like modern soap. You scrub your face and hands, and you feel maybe slightly cleaner, but not really. Brushing your teeth? Forget about it. There's no toothbrush, no toothpaste. If you're lucky, maybe there's a small branch you can fray into a makeshift brush, or maybe a bit of baking soda to scrub with using your finger. But most people in 1875 just don't. They don't brush their teeth. They rinse their mouth with water maybe, and they watch their teeth slowly rot over the years until they fall out or hurt so bad that they have to be pulled. Dental hygiene is not a thing here, and it shows. Every smile you see is missing teeth, blackened stumps, swollen gums. This is normal. Shaving for those who did it involved a straight razor and a steady hand. No safety razors, no electric shavers, no shaving cream, just soap lather if you had it. A very sharp blade held against your throat, and the hope that you don't nick yourself badly because that cut could easily get infected and kill you. Many men just grew beards. It was safer and required less effort. Now you need to get dressed properly, which means more layers. It's chilly this morning, probably going to be hot later, but right now you're cold. So you add another shirt, a heavier coat made of scratchy wool, maybe a bandana around your neck, and a hat. Everyone wears hats. Wide-brimmed hats for the sun, felt hats for warmth, whatever you can find. Your head is cold otherwise, and you're going to be outside all day. The sun out here is brutal, and there's no sunscreen, no UV protection, just fabric between you and skin cancer. By the time you're fully dressed and somewhat washed, you've been awake for maybe an hour, and you've already worked harder than most modern people do all day. You've fetched water multiple times, navigated a terrifying outhouse, washed in cold water with harsh soap, dressed in uncomfortable clothes that itch and chafe, and you haven't even eaten yet. You're already tired, already sore, already questioning every life choice that led to this moment. And the day has barely started. Breakfast is next, and this is where you discover just how different food is going to be. The kitchen area is one corner of the single-room sod house, dominated by a cast-iron stove if you're lucky, or just an open fireplace if you're not. There's no refrigerator, obviously, no freezer, no microwave, no electric kettle, just fire and iron and patience. The woman of the house, because gender roles are extremely rigid here, is already cooking. She's been up for 2 hours starting the fire, mixing dough, frying salt pork, boiling coffee over the flames. You sit at a rough wooden table, really just planks on sawhorses, and what arrives in front of you is not what you're used to. There's no cereal, no toast, no scrambled eggs from the grocery store. Instead, there's salt pork, which is basically fat with thin strips of meat, so heavily salted it makes your mouth pucker. There are biscuits, hard and dense, nothing like a fluffy Pillsbury creation. These biscuits could double as weapons. You're supposed to dunk them in coffee to soften them enough to eat. The coffee itself is strong and bitter, made from grounds that have probably been used twice already, boiled in a pot until it's thick enough to stand a spoon in. If you're really lucky, there might be some beans. Beans from yesterday or the day before, reheated and reheated until they're more memory than meal. Maybe some cornmeal mush, which is exactly what it sounds like. Corn ground up, boiled in water, a grey porridge-like substance that has no flavour beyond sadness. You eat it because you're hungry, because your body needs fuel for the work ahead, not because it tastes good. Food here is functional. It keeps you alive. Enjoyment is secondary if it factors in at all. And this is breakfast every day. The same salt pork, the same hard biscuits, the same bitter coffee. Occasionally there might be an egg if the chickens are laying. Very occasionally there might be milk if someone has a dairy cow and she's producing and you get to it before it spoils, which happens quickly because, again, no refrigeration. In summer, milk left out for a few hours turns sour. In winter it might last longer, but you're also risking it freezing and the container bursting. The diet here is incredibly limited. It's corn, beans, salt pork and hope. That's basically it for most frontier settlers. Corn in various forms, cornbread, cornmeal mush, hominy. Beans because they store well and provide protein. Salt pork because it's one of the few meats that doesn't spoil immediately. Everything is salted or dried or smoked because those are the only preservation methods available. Fresh vegetables? Only if you have a garden and it's currently producing. Fresh fruit? Maybe a few weeks a year if you're in the right place. Otherwise, no. This means scurvy is a real threat. Scurvy, that disease you thought only pirates got, is common on the frontier. Your gums start bleeding. Your teeth loosen. You bruise easily. Wounds won't heal. It's a vitamin C deficiency here, and it's entirely preventable with a balanced diet. But balanced diets don't exist here. Some settlers knew to gather wild plants, rose hips or crab apples, things with vitamin C. Others didn't know and suffered. You probably don't know which plants are safe, so you're gambling every time you try something new. Water is another constant concern. The water from that well, is it safe? You have no idea. There's no water testing, no treatment plants, no EPA standards. You're drinking whatever comes up from the ground and hoping it doesn't make you sick. And often it does make you sick. Dysentery, typhoid, cholera, all spread through contaminated water. People die from drinking bad water all the time. Whole settlements get wiped out when an outbreak hits. You boil water for coffee, which kills some pathogens, but nobody's boiling their drinking water. That's too much work, takes too much fuel, so you drink and you hope. After breakfast, the work begins in earnest, and this is where you discover that every single person in a frontier settlement is working constantly. There is no leisure class here. No weekends, no vacation days, no 8-hour workday. You work from dawn until you can't see anymore, and then you collapse, and you do it again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next, until you're too old or too injured to work, at which point you become a burden. If you're a farmer, and most settlers were farmers, your day starts with the animals. If you have animals, you need to feed the horses or oxen, milk the cow if you have one, feed the chickens, collect eggs, slop the kittens. These aren't pets. These are survival tools, and they require constant care. The cow needs to be milked twice a day every day or she'll stop producing. The chickens need feed and water. The horses need hay and grain. Everything needs constant attention. Then you head to the fields. You have acreage to work, crops to plant or tend or harvest depending on the season. And this work is backbreaking in ways you cannot imagine. There are no tractors, no combines, no powered equipment of any kind. You have a plough, pulled by a horse or an ox if you're fortunate, pulled by yourself if you're not, and you guide this plough through hard, unforgiving soil, turning over earth that has maybe never been ploughed before. The handles dig into your hands, raising blisters that burst and bleed. The dust gets in your eyes, your nose, your mouth, your back screams, your legs tremble, and you keep going because if you don't plant, you don't eat next winter. Planting means walking behind the plough, dropping seeds by hand into furrows, covering them with dirt using your boot. Acre after acre of this. Bent over, dropping seeds, moving forward, dropping more seeds. Your back never stops hurting. Then you have to pray for rain, but not too much rain. Pray for sun, but not too much sun. Pray that hail doesn't destroy everything. Pray that locusts don't descend in clouds that block out the sky and eat every green thing in sight. Because all of these things happen, and when they do, a year of work vanishes in hours. If you manage to grow a crop, then you have to harvest it. By hand, with a scythe or a sickle, cutting down wheat or corn, bundling it, hauling it, threshing it to separate grain from chaff. This takes weeks of constant brutal labour. Everyone in the family helps, including children as young as 5 or 6. Everyone is in the fields until the harvest is done, because if you don't get it in before the weather turns, you lose everything. Maybe you're a cowboy instead of a farmer. That sounds romantic, doesn't it? Riding a horse all day, freedom of the range, campfires under the stars. Except cowboy work is arguably harder and more dangerous than farming. You're on a horse for 12, 14, 16 hours a day. Sounds fun until you've been in the saddle for hour 8, and your legs don't work anymore and your back feels like someone took a sledgehammer to your spine. The saddle sores are horrific. Bleeding, infected patches of skin that never quite heal because you're back in the saddle the next day and the next. You're herding cattle, hundreds or thousands of them, trying to keep them together, keep them moving in the right direction, keep them from stampeding. Cattle are stupid and panicky. A loud noise, a flash of lightning, a wolf howling, any of these things can spook them into a stampede. And when 1,000 head of cattle decide to run, you better get out of the way or you're getting trampled. Cowboys died this way regularly, crushed under hooves, bodies so mangled they were unrecognisable. Then there's the weather. Cowboys work outside in all weather. Blazing heat where the sun bakes you until your skin cracks and bleeds. Pouring rain that soaks you to the bone and doesn't stop for days. Hailstorms that bruise you and spook the cattle. Lightning storms where you're the tallest thing on the prairie, sitting on a metal-shod horse, practically begging to be struck, and cowboys were struck by lightning. Frequently. It was listed as cause of death in enough cowboy journals that it was just considered part of the job. In winter, you're still out there, still tending cattle, still riding, but now you're doing it in temperatures that drop well below 0. Your hands go numb, but you still need to rope cattle, repair fences, break ice on water tanks. Frostbite takes fingers and toes. Some cowboys lost ears or noses, they just fell off, frozen dead and rotting. And you keep working because the cattle need tending and there's no one else to do it. Cattle drives were the peak of cowboy hell. You'd round up hundreds of cattle and drive them north to railroad towns, journeys that took months. You slept on the ground with a rock for a pillow. You ate beans and salt pork cooked over a campfire. You went weeks without bathing. You dealt with river crossings where cattle and men drowned. You dealt with rustlers trying to steal the herd. You dealt with hostile encounters as you moved through different territories. And at the end, when you finally delivered the cattle, you got paid maybe $30 or $40 for 3 months of work. That's it. Then you spent half of it getting drunk in town, because what else were you going to do with it? But maybe you're neither farmer nor cowboy. Maybe you're a woman on the frontier, because women came west too, and their experience was its own special kind of nightmare. Women's work was never done because women did everything related to keeping a household running, and a household needed constant attention to not fall apart. You're up before dawn starting the fire. This isn't flip a switch, this is building a fire from embers you banked the night before, feeding it kindling, blowing on it until your lungs hurt, adding wood, getting it hot enough to cook on. This takes an hour. Every morning. You do this before anyone else is awake because they need hot food and hot coffee and you're the one who makes it happen. After feeding everyone, you clean up, which means hauling water, heating water, washing dishes in the basin, throwing the dirty water outside, then you start the day's cooking. Bread doesn't make itself. You mix flour, water, yeast, knead it by hand for 20 minutes, let it rise, punch it down, let it rise again, bake it in an oven whose temperature you judge by sticking your hand inside and seeing how fast it hurts. No thermometers, no timers, just experience and luck. While bread is rising, you're churning butter if you have milk. This means pouring cream into a wooden churn and working a paddle up and down for 30 to 40 minutes until the fat separates and forms butter. Your arm feels like it's going to fall off, but you keep churning because butter is valuable. It's calories. It makes things taste less terrible. Then there's laundry. Laundry in 1875 is an all-day event. You haul water, lots of water, heat it over the fire in a massive pot, shave in soap, scrub clothes against a washboard until your knuckles bleed, wring them out by hand, haul more water to rinse them, wring them out again, hang them to dry. This destroys your hands. The lye soap eats at your skin. The constant water and scrubbing cracks your knuckles, and they bleed and get infected, and you wrap them in rags and keep working. A single load of laundry, the kind you do in 30 minutes with a modern machine, takes 6 hours by hand. You're also making all the clothes the family wears. By hand, this means spinning thread if you have the raw fibre, weaving or knitting fabric, cutting and sewing garments. Every shirt, every pair of pants, every sock made by you with a needle and thread. No sewing machine unless you're wealthy. Just your fingers pushing a needle through thick fabric over and over until your fingertips are scarred and calloused and bleed if you push too hard. You're tending a garden because fresh vegetables are the difference between getting scurvy and not. This means planting, weeding, watering by hand with buckets you hauled from the well, picking bugs off plants one by one, praying that deer or rabbits don't get through your fence and eat everything. If something grows, you have to preserve it immediately. That means canning or pickling or drying, all of which require more water hauling, more fire tending, more hours standing over a hot stove in summer, putting up food for winter. You're caring for children, of which there are usually many because birth control is not a thing. And children die so often that families have many to ensure some survive. You're pregnant most of your adult life, giving birth every year or two, recovering in days because there's no maternity leave, you just go right back to work. And every pregnancy has a real chance of killing you. Hemorrhage, infection, eclampsia, obstructed labour. There are so many ways childbirth goes wrong. And when it does, you probably die. Women died in childbirth constantly. It was expected. Motherless children were everywhere. You're teaching these children to read if you're literate yourself. There's no public school nearby, or if there is, it's a one-room schoolhouse that operates a few months a year when children aren't needed for farm work. You use a Bible or whatever books you own, rare precious things, and you teach them letters and numbers when you can snatch a few minutes between chores. You're also making soap, making candles, preserving meat, gathering fuel for the fire, mending everything constantly, because nothing is disposable and everything wears out. You do this while pregnant, while nursing an infant, while watching toddlers, while feeling sick or exhausted, or both. And nobody thanks you. This is just expected. This is your role, and if you complain, you're told to work harder. The social isolation of frontier life was particularly hard on women. Men could go to town, go to saloons, join work parties for barn raisings or cattle drives. Women were stuck at the homestead seeing the same faces day after day, going weeks or months without seeing another woman, anyone to talk to who understood. Loneliness drove women mad, not figuratively, literally. Prairie madness was a real diagnosis, a kind of hysteria brought on by isolation and endless work and the grinding monotony of frontier life. Now let's talk about what happens when the sun goes down, because nighttime on the frontier was its own unique terror. There's no electricity, no street lights, no porch lights, nothing. When the sun sets, darkness is absolute. If there's no moon, you cannot see your hand in front of your face. This is a darkness modern people have never experienced unless they've been in wilderness. Complete, total, oppressive darkness. Your only light sources are candles, oil lamps, or firelight. Candles are expensive and precious, made from tallow or beeswax, and they don't produce much light. You hoard them, use them sparingly. Oil lamps are better, but the oil costs money and the lamps are fire hazards. They tip over, they crack, they start fires that burn down homes and kill families. So you light a candle or lamp only when absolutely necessary and go to bed when it gets dark, because what else are you going to do? But going to bed doesn't mean peaceful sleep. First, there's the bed itself. Remember that corn husk mattress? It's making noise every time you shift. There are probably bed bugs in it, little vampires that bite you all night, leaving itchy welts all over your body. Everyone has bed bugs. Everyone. There's no way to get rid of them completely. You can pour boiling water over the bed fray, you can replace the mattress stuffing, but they come back. You learn to live with being bitten nightly. The temperature is wrong. In summer, the sod house holds heat like an oven, and you're sweating through the night. Covers thrown off, desperately trying to get comfortable. In winter, the fire burns down and the cold seeps in through every gap in the walls, and you pile every blanket you own on top of you and still wake up shivering. There's no thermostat, no climate control, just uncomfortable temperatures all night, every night. Then there are the sounds. Outside in the darkness, you hear things. Coyotes yipping and howling in packs, getting closer and farther. Impossible to tell how close they really are. Wolves howling, and these are real wolves. Not the scattered remnants that exist today, but huge packs of predators that will absolutely attack livestock and occasionally people. You hear them, and you wonder if your fence is strong enough, if they could get into the chicken coop, if tonight's the night they decide to test your door. You hear cattle lowing nervously, which could mean predators are nearby, could mean a storm is coming, could mean they're about to stampede for no reason. You hear horses whinnying and stomping. You hear owls and night birds and things rustling in the grass, and you have no idea what any of it means. Every sound could be danger. Every sound could be the prelude to disaster. So you sleep lightly, always partially alert, never fully resting. And people are scared at night. They're scared of animals, but they're also scared of other people. Bandits, outlaws, people desperate enough to steal or kill. Your door has a bar across it, a heavy piece of wood you drop into brackets to secure it. Your rifle is next to the bed, loaded, because if someone breaks in, you're on your own. There's no calling the police. They don't exist out here. You defend yourself or you die. Some settlers assign night watches, taking turns staying awake to listen for trouble. In settlements with multiple families, men would rotate, walking the perimeter, checking on livestock, making sure everything was secure. This was exhausting, cutting into already insufficient sleep, but necessary. Too many things could go wrong in the dark. Weather at night was terrifying in its own way. Thunderstorms rolled in with no warning, lightning splitting the sky, thunder so loud it shook the ground. Your sod house, your log cabin, offered minimal protection. If a tornado formed, you had maybe minutes to react, and your options were limited to huddling in a cellar, if you had one, or lying flat in a ditch and praying. Tornadoes destroyed homesteads regularly, killing families, scattering livestock, erasing months or years of work in minutes. Winter storms were worse. Blizzards came on suddenly, temperatures plummeting, wind driving snow so thick you couldn't see past your arm. People got lost walking from the house to the barn 20 feet away, disoriented in the white chaos, freezing to death within yards of safety. Every winter there were stories of children who went to check on animals and never made it back, found frozen the next day, or men who went for firewood and lost their way. The psychological toll of this life is hard to overstate. You're constantly on edge, constantly worried, constantly exhausted. You worry about crops failing, about animals dying, about getting injured, about your children getting rid, about making it through winter, about bandits, about Indian raids in some regions, about 100 things that could kill you or ruin you. The stress is relentless, and grief was constant. People you knew died regularly. A neighbour's child died of diphtheria. Another neighbour died from an infected cut. Someone was thrown from a horse and broke their neck. Someone else drowned trying to cross a swollen river. The woman down the way died in childbirth. Deaths were so common they stopped being shocking. You went to funerals, you comforted the bereaved, and you moved on because what choice did you have? You buried people in your clothes or wrapped in a blanket because coffins were expensive, a luxury. You buried them in whatever ground you could dig into, often without markers because wood for crosses was precious. Pioneer cemeteries were full of unnamed graves, people forgotten almost as soon as they were buried. The hardness this created in people was necessary for survival, but damaging to the soul. You couldn't grieve properly, couldn't process loss, couldn't be soft or vulnerable because vulnerability got you killed. So you stuffed it down, hardened yourself, became someone who could watch terrible things happen and not break. And that person was different from who you used to be. Let's talk about the lawlessness, this part of the wild West that actually lived up to the name. This wasn't a society with functioning institutions. There were laws, technically, but enforcement was spotty at best and completely absent at worst. In many frontier settlements, there was no sheriff, no marshal, no peace officer of any kind. The nearest law might be 100 miles away, weeks of travel, completely unreachable if you needed help right now. This meant people handled disputes themselves, and by handled I mean shot each other. Someone stole your horse? You tracked them down and dealt with it, which often meant violence. Someone cheated you in a card game. Guns came out. Someone insulted your honour, made a pass at your wife, looked at you wrong. Any of these could lead to killing. Life was cheap and tempers were short and everyone was armed. Frontier towns, the ones with saloons and gambling and prostitutes, were genuinely dangerous places. Men came in from months on the range or in mining camps. They had money to spend and no social graces, and they proceeded to get drunk, gamble, fight and shoot each other. Saturday nights in Abilene or Dodge City or Tombstone saw regular fatalities. Bodies in the street come morning, hauled off and buried in Boot Hill, the cemetery for those who died with their boots on, violently. The famous lawmen like Wyatt Earp or Wild Bill Hickok were not heroes in the modern sense. They were violent men who happened to be on the side that called itself law. They killed people, many people, sometimes in fair fights but often not, and they were feared more than respected. You didn't want the law's attention because the law might decide you were the problem and solve you permanently. Outlaws were a real and constant threat. Jesse James and his gang terrorized Missouri and Kansas, robbing trains and banks, killing anyone who got in their way. They had folk hero status among some, but to the people they robbed, they were just violent criminals. Butch Cassidy's Wild Bunch operated throughout the West, hitting banks and trains, hiding out in remote canyons, engaging in shootouts with posses. Billy the Kid killed his first man at 15 and was dead himself at 21, shot by a sheriff in the dark. Stagecoaches and trains got robbed regularly. If you were travelling with any money or valuables, there was a real chance masked men would stop your coach, take everything, and maybe kill you if you resisted, or they were having a bad day. Wells Fargo hired armed guards, but guards got killed too. Travel was dangerous. Cattle rustling was rampant. Your herd represented your entire wealth, your survival, and thieves would cut out as many head as they could and disappear into the night. Ranchers formed vigilante groups, caught rustlers, and hanged them on the spot. No trial, no judge, just rough justice. Lynch mobs were common and not always right about who they were hanging. Claim jumping happened constantly in mining country. You'd stake a claim, start working it, and someone with more guns would show up and take it. The legal system, such as it was, favoured whoever could hold the claim by force. Murders over mining claims numbered in the thousands. Even within settlements, violence simmered. Personal feuds escalated into shooting wars. The Hatfields and McCoys are famous, but there were countless family feuds that resulted in deaths. Feuds over land, water rights, insults, anything. Once a feud started, it fed on itself, revenge begetting revenge, until one family was destroyed or both were. And the violence wasn't always between settlers. Depending on when and where you were, conflict with Native American tribes was ongoing. This wasn't the simplistic cowboys versus Indians narrative from movies. It was complicated, tragic, and brutal on both sides. Native peoples were fighting to keep their lands, their way of life, against an unstoppable tide of settlers who saw the land as empty and available. Treaties were signed and broken, promises made and ignored. Desperate people on both sides committed atrocities. Raids happened. Settlements got attacked. People got killed or taken. War parties rode through, burning, stealing livestock, fighting. And settlers retaliated, attacking villages, killing indiscriminately. It was a cycle of violence with no good guys, just people trying to survive in a system that made coexistence nearly impossible. If you were on the frontier in the 1870s, this was part of your reality. Constant tension, constant fear, occasional horror. Your survival strategy in this environment was to be quiet, be armed, don't make enemies, and hope that violence passed you by. But it didn't always. Even careful people got caught up in things, even peaceful people ended up dead. Medical care, or the lack thereof, is another aspect of frontier life that would absolutely destroy a modern person. You get sick, you're probably going to die. You get injured, you're probably going to die. There are no antibiotics, no surgical sterile fields, no IV fluids, no blood transfusions, no modern medicine whatsoever. There might be a doctor in a town a day's ride away, and that doctor got his training through an apprenticeship, maybe attended a medical school that taught outdated practices. He's doing his best, but his best is primitive. Common injuries had huge consequences. You cut yourself badly while working. That cut could get infected, the infection could spread, and you'd die from sepsis. Happened all the time. Broken bones, the doctor sets it, hopes it heals straight, but it often doesn't, leaving you with a permanent limp or a useless arm. Crush injuries from working with livestock or equipment, amputation without anaesthesia, sawing through bone while you scream, hoping you don't die from shock or blood loss or infection afterward. Diseases we don't even think about anymore were death sentences. Pneumonia killed routinely, especially children and the elderly. Tuberculosis, called consumption, spread through families, causing people to waste away over months or years, coughing blood, unable to breathe. No cure, no treatment, just slow death. Diphtheria created a membrane in the throat that suffocated children. Cholera caused such severe dehydration that people died within hours of showing symptoms. Typhoid fever burned through settlements. Smallpox, despite vaccination being available, still killed because not everyone was vaccinated, or the vaccine had lost potency. Childbirth, as mentioned earlier, was incredibly dangerous. 1 in 8 women died in childbirth or from childbirth-related causes. Think about that. 1 in 8. If you knew 8 women, 1 of them would die giving birth. Hemorrhage, infection, eclampsia, obstructed labour where the baby couldn't pass and both mother and child died. All common. Midwives did what they could, but when things went really wrong, there was nothing to be done. You hemorrhaged, you died. You got sepsis from retained placenta, you died. The baby was positioned wrong, you both died. Infant mortality was staggering. Half of children didn't live to age 5. Half. Families had 8, 10, 12 children, expecting several to die. Children died from common childhood diseases, from accidents, from malnutrition, from exposure. Parents grieved and moved on because they had to. There was always more work, and grief was a luxury they couldn't afford. Dental problems were excruciating and common. You got a cavity, it hurt, it got infected. The infection spread to your jaw, your face swelled up, and maybe it killed you, or maybe it just hurt forever. Pulling teeth was the only treatment, done with pliers, no anaesthetic, just brute force. People lost all their teeth by middle age. Dentures existed but were expensive and poorly fitted. Most people just gummed their food. Mental illness wasn't understood. Depression, anxiety, PTSD from trauma, all unrecognised and untreated. People who couldn't cope were called weak or crazy. Women showing symptoms were diagnosed with hysteria and confined. Men were expected to just push through. Many turned to alcohol, which was cheap and plentiful. Alcoholism was epidemic on the frontier. What else were you going to do with unprocessed trauma and unrelenting stress? You drank. The patent medicine industry thrived on people's desperation. Travelling salesmen sold bottles of mysterious liquid that claimed to cure everything from cancer to baldness. These mixtures usually contained alcohol, sometimes cocaine or morphine, occasionally just water and food colouring. They didn't cure anything, but they made you feel better temporarily because you were drunk or high. People spent money they couldn't afford on these frauds because they were desperate for relief. If you got seriously ill or injured, your options were suffer at home, go see the questionable doctor and probably die anyway, or try folk remedies that ranged from harmless to actively harmful. Poultices made from who knows what herbs that may or may not do anything, prayer, superstition. People did what they could with what they had, which was almost nothing. The seasonal nature of frontier life added another layer of difficulty because what you did, what you dealt with, depended entirely on what season it was. Each season brought its own challenges, its own work, its own dangers. Spring meant planting season and the most frantic work of the year. You had to get seeds in the ground as soon as the soil thawed, and that meant ploughing and planting from dawn until dark every single day. If you waited too long, you missed the growing season. If you planted too early, a late frost killed everything and you had to start over. The weather was unpredictable, cold snaps followed by heat waves, and you just had to gamble and hope. Spring also meant flooding. Rivers swollen with snowmelt burst their banks, washing away homesteads, drowning livestock, destroying stored food. You'd spend all winter carefully rationing food, and then a flood would wipe it out. Mud was everywhere, making travel nearly impossible, making every chore take twice as long. And spring was when women gave birth most often, because births often happened 9 months after winter's forced indoor time together. So just when work was most intense, households had newborns needing constant care, mothers recovering from delivery, and all the regular work still needing to be done. Summer brought heat brutal and unrelenting. Without air conditioning, without even electric fans, you sweltered. The sod house baked like an oven. You worked outside in temperatures over 100 degrees, sun beating down, no shade, limited water. Heat exhaustion and heat stroke killed people. You'd be working, feeling fine, then suddenly dizzy, collapsing, dying before anyone could help. Summer also brought insects. Mosquitoes in clouds so thick you breathed them in. Flies everywhere on everything spreading disease, making life miserable. Grasshoppers, locusts descending in biblical swarms that ate crops down to bare earth, ate leather, ate the wooden handles off tools. A grasshopper plague could destroy a year's work in an afternoon. You'd watch your fields get consumed and be powerless to stop it. Drought was a summer threat. The rain would stop, the sun would keep blazing, and slowly everything would die. Wells went dry. Creeks stopped flowing, crops withered. Grass turned brown and livestock died of thirst, and you watched your survival evaporate in the heat, unable to do anything. Fall was harvest time, and this determined whether you lived or died come winter. If your crops came in, if you successfully harvested and stored them, you would probably survive. If crops failed, you were in desperate trouble. Harvest was all hands work, everyone in the fields cutting, gathering, threshing, storing. You worked until the light was gone, worked through pain and exhaustion, because every bit of food mattered. Fall was also when you slaughtered animals, for winter meat. You'd pick the animals that wouldn't survive winter anyway, slaughter them, butcher them, smoke the meat, salt it, store it. This was bloody hard work that had to be done before the weather turned. And you had to do it right, or the meat spoiled and you had nothing. Preserving food was a fall obsession, canning vegetables, pickling, drying, smoking, anything that would make food last through winter. Women spent weeks over hot stoves in fall processing food because if you didn't have enough put by, you starved come February. Then winter arrived and winter was survival mode. Work slowed because you couldn't do much in the cold and snow, but survival work never stopped. You had to keep the fire going, which meant constantly feeding wood into the stove or fireplace, which meant someone had to go out in the cold and bring in wood from the woodpile, which had to be stocked before winter because you couldn't chop frozen wood easily. You had to feed livestock, which meant breaking ice on water tanks, hauling hay, making sure animals didn't freeze. You lost animals every winter. They froze, they starved, they got picked off by wolves. You did your best and accepted losses. You lived on stored food, the monotony intensifying as weeks passed. Same beans, same corn, same salt pork, meal after meal after meal. Fresh food was a memory. Scurvy crept in. You ran low on supplies and had to ration carefully. Do we have enough flour to last until spring? Enough coffee? Enough oil for the lamp? Cabin fever set in? You were trapped inside for weeks on end, the same people, the same four walls, the same nothing to do. Tensions rose, families fought, some people snapped, and when they did, bad things happened. Murder-suicides occurred, not frequently, but often enough that people whispered about it. So-and-so's husband went crazy and killed the whole family, then himself. It was understood that winters could break people. The seasons cycled, and you cycled with them, and it never got easier. Each season brought new threats, new work, new ways to die or fail. There was no season of rest, no time when you could relax. It was constant, and it wore people down. Let's talk about the economics of frontier life, because even in the wilderness, money mattered. You needed money or goods to trade for things you couldn't make yourself. Coffee, sugar, metal tools, ammunition, fabric, nails all had to be purchased. And money was scarce. Most frontier families lived on credit, always owing the general store or the bank. You'd get supplies on credit, promising to pay after harvest, and then, when harvest came, you'd find that crop prices had fallen or your yield was lower than expected, and you couldn't pay what you owed. So the debt carried over, accumulated, grew with interest. Many settlers were in a debt cycle they could never escape. Banks weren't charitable institutions. They charged high interest and foreclosed at the first opportunity. If you couldn't pay, they took your land, your equipment, everything. You'd be left with nothing, forced to work for someone else or move on and try again elsewhere, where a closure was common and devastating. The boom and bust nature of the frontier economy made things worse. Mining towns would explode into existence when gold or silver was found, thousands of people flooding in, businesses popping up overnight. Then the mine would play out, and the town would die just as fast. Buildings abandoned, people moving on to the next strike. If you'd invested in property or a business in that town, you lost everything. Cattle prices fluctuated wildly based on supply and demand, weather, railroad access. You might plan on getting $30 a head for your cattle and base your entire year's budget on that, and then find the prices dropped to 15. Your income just got cut in half, but your expenses didn't. How do you make that up? Equipment was expensive and broke constantly. A plough cost more than a month's wages, and it needed to be replaced or repaired regularly. A good horse cost a fortune. If your horse died, went lame, got stolen, you'd have to somehow come up with the money for another or be unable to work. The initial investment to start farming or ranching was enormous, and most people borrowed heavily to get started, spending years paying it back. There was no safety net, no social services, no government aid. If you failed completely. If you couldn't work because of injury or illness, nobody helped you. You became a beggar, dependent on charity that might not come. Poor houses existed, grim institutions where the destitute went to die slowly. You did everything in your power to avoid that fate. But despite all of this, despite the hardship and danger and suffering, people kept coming west. Why? For many it was desperation. The East was crowded, opportunities were limited, poverty was grinding. The West promised land, a fresh start, a chance to own something. The Homestead Act offered free land if you could prove it up, live on it for 5 years and improve it. For people with nothing, that was everything. Some came fleeing things, debt, criminal records, failed relationships, bad reputations. The West didn't ask questions. You could reinvent yourself, be whoever you claimed to be. Former soldiers, former slaves, former convicts, all found a kind of freedom in anonymity. Some genuinely believed in manifest destiny, the idea that Americans were meant to spread across the continent, that it was God's will, that they were bringing civilization to wilderness. They saw themselves as pioneers, heroes, building something important. The reality was uglier than the mythology, but the mythology was powerful. And a few struck it rich, found gold, built successful ranches, made money. These were the exception, not the rule, but their stories spread, and hope is a powerful motivator. If he could do it, maybe you could too. So people came, they tried, and most of them failed or just barely survived. But they kept coming. Now, as you lie in this uncomfortable bed in this dirt-floored house in 1875, exhausted from a day of work harder than anything you've done in your modern life, you have to face some hard truths. You probably wouldn't survive this. Not long term. Your modern body, used to climate control and soft furniture and unlimited food and medicine, wouldn't adapt quickly enough. You'd get sick or injured, or you'd make a mistake and that would be it. Your modern sensibilities would work against you. You'd be horrified by the violence, the casual cruelty, the acceptance of suffering. You'd struggle with the rigid gender roles, the racism that was assumed and baked into the culture, the treatment of native peoples, the brutality toward animals. Everything that made you a decent person in 2005 would make you a target or a failure in 1875. The skills you have would be mostly useless. You can't use a computer here. You can't use your education in marketing or programming or graphic design. You don't know how to plough a field, butcher an animal, build a house, shoot accurately, read animal behaviour, predict weather by looking at the sky. Everything you'd need to know. To survive, you don't know. You'd be dependent on others, a burden, and burdens didn't last long. The loneliness would break you. No contact with anyone from your time, no shared cultural references, no way to explain where you really came from. You'd have to pretend constantly to be someone you're not, and the isolation of that would be crushing. You couldn't talk about movies or music or technology or any of the things that made up your identity. You'd be fundamentally alone in a crowd, and the smell. Nobody talks about the smell, but it would be overwhelming. Everyone around you hasn't bathed in weeks. They're wearing clothes that haven't been washed properly in months. There's no deodorant, no toothpaste, no soap that actually works. Every building smells like smoke and sweat and filth. Every person smells like they're actively decomposing. You'd gag constantly at first, maybe eventually get used to it, but you'd also smell like that. You'd become part of the stench. The diet would destroy your health. Limited variety, almost no fresh vegetables or fruit, everything heavily salted, nutrition minimal. You'd develop deficiencies, scurvy symptoms. Your teeth would start having problems. The lack of modern dental care alone would be torture. That toothache you'd have ignored with ibuprofen and a dental appointment becomes an infection that swells your face and possibly kills you. The violence would traumatize you. You'd see people die, probably see people get killed. You might have to kill someone in self-defense. That weighs on a person, especially someone not raised in that culture. PTSD would be severe, and there'd be no treatment, no therapy, no acknowledgement that you were suffering. You'd be expected to just deal with it and move on. The gender dynamics, if you're a woman from modern times, would be suffocating. You'd have no autonomy, no independence, no voice. Your husband, if you had one, would own you legally. You couldn't have property, couldn't vote, couldn't leave an abusive situation. You'd be expected to be perpetually pregnant, perpetually cooking and cleaning and serving. Any spirit or independence would be beaten out of you, literally in many cases. And you'd watch your children die, probably multiple times, and be expected to just make more. If you're a modern man, the constant physical labour would break your body. Your back would give out, your joints would deteriorate, injuries would accumulate. By your 40s, you'd move like you were 70, bent and hurting and worn down, and you'd see younger, stronger men looking at your assets, your land, your wife, and you'd know that violence could come at any time from any direction. So here's the real question. After spending a day in 1875, experiencing even a fraction of what daily life was like, would you want to stay? Or would you be desperately looking for a way back to 2025, to air conditioning and antibiotics and grocery stores and flushing toilets and the internet and everything else you took for granted? The Wild West was real, and it was nothing like the movies. It was hard and dirty and dangerous and mostly just boring. The same brutal work every day, survival always in question. The people who lived through it were incredibly tough, tougher than most of us can imagine. They endured things we couldn't, built things with their bare hands, carved lives out of hostile land through sheer determination. And they paid a price for it, in bodies broken, minds damaged, lives cut short. We romanticize the frontier, the cowboys and pioneers and the open range. We make movies about shootouts and adventures and freedom, but the reality was sweat and stink and suffering. It was watching your children die. It was working until your body gave out. It was living in fear and squalor and accepting that as normal. It was hard in ways that are difficult to convey to people who have never lived without modern conveniences. As you drift off to sleep tonight, in your comfortable bed, in your climate-controlled room, with a full belly and clean water and medical care a phone call away, take a moment to appreciate what you have, because what you have, this soft and safe and easy life, would have seemed like paradise to someone in 1875. They would have thought you were describing heaven. Indoor plumbing, food that doesn't taste like salt, medicine that actually works. No bandits, no wolves, no starvation. Impossible. You're living in impossible luxury, and you do it so effortlessly you don't even notice. That's how far we've come. That's how much better things are now, despite all our problems and complaints. We're not fighting for survival every single day. We're not watching half our children die. We're not one bad winter away from starvation. We've got problems, sure, but they're not 1875 problems. So sleep well tonight, safe and warm and comfortable. Dream about the frontier if you want, about wide open spaces and adventure. But be grateful, deeply grateful, that you don't actually have to wake up there tomorrow. Because if you did, you probably wouldn't survive the week. And if you enjoyed this journey back in time, if this helped you relax or gave you something interesting to think about as you drift off, please hit that like button. Subscribe if you want more history deep dives, more stories about how people actually lived in different eras. Comment below and tell me honestly, do you think you could survive in the Wild West? Could you handle the work, the danger, the hardship? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for spending your evening with me. Thank you for listening to this story about a time and place that shaped America, but was far harder than we usually acknowledge. I hope you learned something. I hope you appreciated your modern life a little more, and I hope you sleep well tonight. Sweet dreams, safe in your comfortable modern world. Until next time, take care and good night.